is what we really wanted to do is to build a common understanding of gender-based violence and how it interacts with meeting environmental and development goals. And why is to respond to the urgency to pursue women and girls' rights to well-being and dignity. And this, how we are planning to do is to bring forth and amplify voices of women and girls to contribute and to engage. So these three questions, so the presenters who will be coming after me for the session will be looking at these three questions. And to look at some of the participants who are joining from all arrays of stakeholders, of other areas of discussions, we are trying to build this dialogue to respond to the current work of the CBD, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity's ongoing work on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So I just want to also take a moment to check with the interpretation if everything is going okay. So I'm going to wait for a minute. Okay, so before we go on to the other discussions, I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Basil Van Ha, who is here with us today, and he is the co-chair of the Post-2020 Open-Ended Working Group. So very happy to have you, Mr. Basil, and we're looking forward for you to share some of your knowledge and also setting the stage for this webinar. So thank you so much for being here, and I give the floor to you.
Good day to everyone. Can you hear me? Can you signal if you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so well, thank you for having me, and I'm really happy to be able to join you, and I want to listen to you. So, but Nalini told me that I had to give you some points, so I will do so. I want to talk about a few introduction remarks about why I think what you're doing is important and how it is generally set in the process. But I also want to talk a little bit about the process, where we are and how we're going to be working together. And then the third point is how a couple advice on how you can get your perspective best heard and best reflected in the process. So that's the agenda. The introduction. Our vision is living in harmony with nature, and we all have to keep that in mind very, very clearly. And what is important there is that notion of harmony. And what is an harmonious world? It is obviously a world where people are respecting nature and we are keeping and being good stewards of nature. And that means also that this is a world where people are in harmony with themselves. And that means a proper place for both gender and for all genders in our society. And that's where I feel that you're providing us with a very important part of the equation. I think a discussion of nature that would not engage women and girls would be a discussion of nature that would be bound to fail. So all that to say that I'm not taking lightly at all those discussions, and I'm not taking at all those points. I've been looking at some of the documentation from your dialogue, and I've been struck by the preeminence of some of the very important issues we're going to need to be looking at. Our food system, our decision as consumer, both in cities, big and small, for people with that have a good way of living and means to do it, and people that maybe not have everything they need yet. And then this is taking us to the notion of rights. And a society and a community where rights are not respected is not an harmonious society, and will have challenge to conserve nature and ensure the survival of their community. So you will see that I'll be talking about those issues through my remarks, and I want to start by thanking you for the work you're doing and encourage you. I know it's not easy. I know the challenge exists, and I see them. And every one of us in our society, wherever we are, we have a role to play in making sure that we can have a better, balanced, and harmonious gender relationship. So that's the setting of the table, and explaining a little bit how I see your work. Now let's turn a little bit to the process. We're living into a pretty unique situation where I've signed up for a process, and I think we all signed up for a process that was going to take 2 years, and we're past the 2 years line now. And we have a plan, and we know it's going to take at least 1 more year, but we don't know everything. And what we've learned is the notion that we need to be adaptable, flexible, and change. And that means trust. We need to trust each other. We need to be patient with each other. We're trying new things. We'll do everything we can to make those new things work. But experience is that not every one of them will work. There will be mistakes. There will be problems. Things will not work. My connection dropped a minute ago, and I hope I did not miss too much, but I was able to restart it. So we've set up a process that enables to do as much as we can in the period, in the additional time we have. There will be on December 15 and 16 an informal session of the SEPSTA and SBI that will talk about the One Health situation. So those are 2 days to talk about an important subject, but also to get everybody familiar with how they can speak and participate and engage into the process. So that's different from September, where it was more about people listening. This time is about people engaging. This will be followed in January, end of January, and in February by informal session of the SEPSTA and SBI. This is very important. This is an opportunity to go through all the agenda items. And you will see yesterday, the all-important monitoring framework, that is where the performance indicators are, have been published by the SEPSTA, by the Secretariat for the SEPSTA discussion. So very important that you have a look at that and you engage into that. SBI, following that, will also have 2 weeks of sessions. So each will be 2 weeks, and I think they're going to be, and that's not me making those decisions, but that's what I understand. They will be 2 hours per day and set over the course of 2 weeks. And then those are informal. There will be a chair's report, but that's not an official meeting. The Bureau will meet after that to evaluate how this works and make decisions on the next steps to go to the formal meeting. And those formal meetings, if everything goes well, will take place in March or April. We hope we can have them in person, but it is possible, may not be possible to in person, in which case we'll have to look at other formats. Why the rush and why we need to move? Well, nature is not waiting, and we've lost a year, and we're making the best of that year, but we need to move and take action. I think there is a general consensus that we don't want the COP to go to 2022. We want the COP to be in 2021. It may be very late in 2021, but that's, which means that we need to have our open-ended working group 3 in the summer. There is no date yet, but if I looked at the time we have, I think the most reasonable time to have that will be at the end of July or beginning of August. And this in turn means that we need to have the advice from SEPSTA and SBI sometime by the end of May. And that would enable us to write a draft one. So that's a very quick summary of what we know from the in terms of process. Now let's turn to the third point I wanted to talk to you is about how you're going to be engaging and how you can help us. I've seen in some of the presentation some very good and precise language for targets and goals. That's very useful. I think we're all struggling with the notion of issues like the role of women and girls and gender. Are they in a particular target or should they be in every target? In a sense, they are, by default in every target. But if you're everywhere, you're kind of nowhere as well. So despite the very Cartesian approach of having women and girls and genders issues everywhere, it is felt that it is more effective to have a few targets. I've also seen in presentation that you've identified a few targets where you think you can make the best contribution. That is very useful. And I encourage you to develop some wording on how you think those targets should be done. And then, given the mandate Francis and I have in terms of drafting draft one, we can accept input only from Substa, SBI, the parties, and from the thematic consultation. It's going to be very important that you carry your wording to parties that are sympathetic to your views and ask them to present that wording. So you're going to have to work. So finally, the key message I want to leave with you is first to thank you for your engagement. Second, to encourage you to continue to work. So go through that monitoring frameworks, participate in the Substa and SBI. We need you to be part of that. Francis and I will also, I forgot to mention that, organize a series of open stakeholder webinars through over the last few months to give you another opportunity for all non-state actors to be able to engage and participate in the dialogue. So I have not kept track of time, so I don't know if I'm terribly over time, but those are the few things I wanted to leave with you. I hope that that works for you, and then I'm really looking forward to listen to your discussion and learn from you. Thank you, Renali. Back to you.
Still getting used to it. So many webinars and still these glitches. So thank you so much for taking the time and also for being here, because I think you did point out some of the key elements that we are also really trying to push is the rights-based approach in the monitoring framework of the post-2020. And from the gender perspective, we are hoping that these dialogues will help us also engage with a wider audience and also be able to come up with some concrete recommendations, like you said, in specific targets or in specific indicators that we could propose. So we have been making submissions on those. And hopefully you will be here also for the following presentations and on specific to address the issue of gender-based violence and looking at women's human rights defenders issue and its implications from the environmental perspective. I'm really happy to be having our panelists addressing some of those key issues, including bringing in some concrete recommendations, which we hope to again send it out across. So thank you so much once again, Mr. Basil, for being here. And so with no further ado, I would also now take on with the formal panelist discussions. So once again, I'm going to share my screen. So I hope you all can see my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, Tina.
Okay, all right. So before, without further ado, the first panel discussion that we will be having is on gender-based violence, the dialogue and environmental linkages. And this part of the dialogue will be looking at the understanding the violence of inequality towards a just 2020 era. And for this, we are very happy to have Kate and Laura, who are from the IUCN's Global Program on Governance and Rights. So Kate is a senior program manager and Laura is the gender program officer. So thank you both for being here. And without further ado, I will give the floor to you already. So I have your presentation and just give me a sign to change whenever you want it.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you can hear me all right and our connection holds smoothly. Great. Thank you for the thumbs up. Mr. Co-Chair, what a pleasure to have your attention today. Thank you so much for your remarks. Thank you so much for the invitation to present our work today and to have this conversation with you all today. We feel this is a particularly special day to be talking about these issues, not least in the context of this post-2020 process, but of course because today is the International Day on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women, and the first day that kicks off the 16 Days campaign of activism against gender-based violence. So next slide, please. Today we have been invited to talk about some of the research that we have been doing. We want to use our time today to do essentially two things. We'd like to share some of the overarching process, the research that we conducted, and the key findings on the linkages between gender-based violence and environment issues. And then we want to save some time, and I'm going to turn the floor to my colleague Laura to talk a little bit more about ideas and recommendations to inform cross-sector action, and how in particular the post-2020 framework can help to achieve our rights-based gender-responsive goals and objectives. And most importantly, I think we're really looking forward to being a part of this conversation and this dialogue, and we'd like to hear from you about where we really need to concentrate our collective efforts. I think this point that Basil raised is really important about we have the potential to sort of throw lots of seeds out there, but where can we really focus our attention to tackle some of the most pressing and urgent barriers to meeting the goals of this convention in particular, but then across other related environmental spheres. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So before we go on and dive in to some pretty heavy topics, we like to take a moment to please just be mindful that this presentation will discuss various expressions of gender-based violence, can be upsetting, so please do take care. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So, is there a link between gender-based violence and the environment? Let's dive in. I think for many of us who've been working for years on these issues, lifetimes perhaps, on women's rights and gender equality advocacy, human rights, conservation, sustainable development, disaster resilience, we probably know the answer to this question. We might have experiences, stories, and yet very little has actually been documented on these links per se. In recent years in particular, it became really clear to us that these considerable knowledge gaps have persisted, actually standing as barriers to meeting the goals of our interlinked agendas, like the SDGs, certainly, but also the gender responsive commitments that many of our environment-focused organizations and policy frameworks have made. So we've been extremely lucky, we think, to have this opportunity through a 10-year collaboration with USAID called Agent, Advancing Gender in the Environment, where we were able to build out a 2-year research effort to understand these links and try to establish a substantial knowledge base that cuts across issues and sectors upon which further work, of course, can be built. And we wanted to explore a range of recommendations, not least focused at ourselves, to improve our own work, first to do no harm, then to do better, and to, we hope, inform broader environment policymaking, programming, and practice that can and will and does anticipate, understand, mitigate, respond to, and prevent violence. Next slide, please. So what is gender-based violence? Let's establish this before we go further. We understand and define that gender-based violence is any harm or potential or threat of harm, that part being very important, perpetrated against an individual or group on the basis of gender. Gender-based violence is a tool of control and power. It occurs everywhere across all our societies as both an expression and an indicator of gender inequality, and also a tool to keep it intact. GBV takes many forms: physical, sexual, psychological, economic, institutional, and is characterized by many different expressions of violence which often overlap and intersect with each other. So here we see physical, sexual, verbal abuse, sexual harassment, stalking, rape, intimate partner violence, child marriage, economic deprivation, such as property grabbing, and human trafficking. So just an example of scale here around the world, it's estimated that 1 in 3 women will experience violence in her lifetime. But we do know, and I have to underscore that this number is wildly underreported. And we also know that stigma and gender norms mean that we don't have a full picture of violence. For example, the men who have no place to report that violence or wouldn't dare do so. And the impacts of violence are widespread, affecting communities, individuals across the life course, with direct and indirect costs to families, economies, global public health, development, and the protection and resilience of our environment, which we came to see very clearly through our research process. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for doing this. Uh-oh, we've lost it. Okay, so on the screen here, you see just a snapshot of our process here. On the left side, you see, for example, the methodology that went into building this research. We reviewed, for example, more than 1,000 documents in 3 languages. We put out a call for case studies. We developed and disseminated a survey to gender and environment practitioners. Here I want to underscore an interesting finding. 59% of respondents indicated they had witnessed, seen in some way gender-based violence in project implementation. Nearly half mentioned this was not a priority in their organization to tackle, and nearly 3/4 emphasized a lack of overall knowledge and specific tools to be able to address those linkages. Through rounds of expert review, peer validation, we launched our major publication in January of this year. This publication has been launched also in Spanish, if you're looking for that. We also have a recorded webinar in Spanish, in Espanol. If anybody needs to access that information right away, we can share that link with you. And on the right side of the screen, we have a snapshot of where we're already working on next steps, and we'll come back to this at the end. So next slide, please. Ultimately, what do we know? What have we found? We can say that across environment-related sectors and spheres, from fisheries to forests to farming, gender-based violence is a commonplace tool of social and economic control to maintain or promote unequal and gendered power dynamics relating to the access to, uses of, benefits derived from, and control of natural resources. It's also clear across sectors that the potential for violence particularly increases in the face of environmental stressors, where the control over increasingly scarce or degraded resources and associated livelihoods result in higher tension, increased negative coping strategies, and reduced resilience for families and communities. Next slide, please. I keep trying to click the slide myself.
Sorry, I know
No.
if you do it yourself. This is a little bit easier.
It's
Sorry
okay.
about that.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we've organized the evidence as we found across 3 main categories or themes. So first we look at access and control of land and resources. And I want to mention here that actually it was around this theme where we received the most cases, or rather the most cases we received from our call fit into this theme. And here we see, for example, the legal and customary systems and social norms that essentially dictate who is able to use and manage and sell and own land and resources. These are the conditions that underpin gender-based violence across sectors and spheres. Next, we examine what we call environmental pressures and threats, where gender-based violence is employed to exploit resources, and where worsening environmental conditions exacerbate gender-based violence. And then third, we look at the work of protecting the environment, because no sector is exempt. Women have played, for generations, since the beginning of our cultures, women have played critical, powerful roles protecting Mother Earth across our cultures. But varied violence is experienced, and as we have seen, used to restrict, diminish, and thwart those environmental efforts. And we pay special attention here to the work of defenders, as well as to the dynamics of environmental workplaces. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some very top-line sort of overarching trends that emerged, by no means exhaustive, but hopefully enough food for thought to dig into in conversation here. Essentially, the responsibilities that are gendered, the gender division of labor, roles and responsibilities, can often put women and girls disproportionately in everyday dangerous situations as they complete these tasks, especially in the context of resource scarcity or interrupted access to these resources, really for any and all reasons, when they must spend more time and walk further distances, for example, to get what they need. Gender-based violence is seen to maintain an inequitable status quo, with research showing across diverse sectors that also diverse actors, including both men and women, employ gender norms violently as a means for controlling land and resources, including as a tool to exert force and to manage sociocultural status, and as well as for negotiations over resources and facilitating property grabbing in many parts of the world. Here and throughout, it's really important to underscore that Indigenous communities, especially Indigenous women in all regions of the world, face intersecting forms of discrimination, marginalization, and violence, making them in particular here, particularly and altogether more vulnerable to land grabbing and associated GBV, which impacts loss of livelihoods, identities, and even culture, with less access to legal, economic, and other forms of redress. And particular dynamics are evident in relation to specific sectors with variation across contexts. So for example, across parts of Southeast Asia, gendered violence is particularly employed to enable trafficking of men and boys into fishing industry, in particular illegal fishing activity, but not limited to illegal, where evidence shows they suffer physical and sexual abuse and often have very limited opportunities to report or receive support for that kind of abuse. While gender-based violence is evident in survival strategies and everyday negotiations around resources, sex for fish transactions being so commonplace in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa, for example, it's considered a very deeply entrenched part of social and economic fabric. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So a lot to cover here, and I won't even begin to tackle it all. Essentially, when our ecosystems in our inequitable societies are stressed and resources become reduced, the conditions become perfect for gender-based violence. And here too, it's important to emphasize that essentially what we've seen across the evidence base is that anytime, really anytime, there's an intervention that changes the way people, individuals, or communities are able to access or control their resources, their land around them, there is the potential to exploit the existing gendered violence that may exist, exacerbate it, and introduce new forms of violence. And here we see sort of this consistent pattern, this repeating pattern of kind of a vicious feedback loop where gender-based violence is used to worsen environmental degradation. So think, for example, in a wildlife trafficking situation where gendered violence is used to be able to enable that crime. And then the doing so actually worsens the environmental or ecosystem degradation. We look, for example, here in this section of the research around major infrastructure, agribusiness industry, and the industries of extraction. Here we know that these activities have the very strong likelihood to disrupt local ecosystems, social systems, and economies. They displace local communities, have the potential to degrade and pollute our environment, interrupt access to natural resources, and affect livelihoods. All of these things are linked with gender dynamics, as I know this group knows, and in particular, evidence of gender-based violence. Another common thread here is that a lot of these industries predominantly rely, again, on a kind of gendered division of labor, a patriarchal division of labor, wherein men are often the ones who benefit the most in the form of land compensations and job opportunities, while women are in a position to lose the most in terms of access to land and also resources necessary for their family's nutrition and livelihood, to name a few. This is true from Senegal to the US and Canada. We look at environmental crime, which, by the way, is the fourth largest form of transnational organized crime just after the drug trade, with an estimated growth rate 2 to 3 times faster than the global economy. And environmental crime regularly employs gender-based violence as business as usual. GBV is one of the means for enabling the activity, with clear cases related to illegal charcoal trading, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, illicit mining, and wildlife trafficking, again, as I mentioned. The militarization of these activities actually relies on gender norms and GBV to function, but we've also seen that GBV is actually used in the efforts to combat these crimes as well. For example, in the cases of protected areas, which are managing the relationships in the local communities, and where we know women have already limited access and limited voice to be able to navigate changing access, to be able to get the resources they need, accessing water, for example. I know I'm already running out of time here. I have an infographic on the screen here. All of these infographics are available for your use. I'm going to talk about where to find them. We have here some data on the screen that came from UN Women from a couple of years ago. This is among the most well-documented area of work. We know gender-based violence escalates in times of disaster, almost any kind of disaster. We don't have to look much further than around us in the context of this pandemic to see the escalating rates of violence everywhere. Next slide, please. So in the context of disaster situations and a changing climate, we again see some very prominent themes here. Conditions of scarcity are linked to gender-based violence in global north and south. Droughts across Australia, for example, post-hurricane context in the United States triggered various rises of various forms of violence, while coping strategies, survival strategies, such as child marriage, have been documented increasingly across sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. Gender-based violence in emergency-related situations, migration and displacement situations and shelters is evident, with these being particularly unsafe conditions for women and other commonly marginalized people, especially those who identify as part of the LGBTQ community, again, where the ability to report and access services is particularly challenged. Next slide, please. I'm going to try to go quickly. So running out of time here, gender-based violence impacts our work every day, everywhere. And work to protect the environment is no different. This is data here about the numbers of aggressions that were registered against women defenders in just 1 year time. Next slide, please. So we found very clear indication that the rise in activity of women environmental human rights defenders, which of course rises due to the need for that activity, is met with violent and gendered means of control. So for women defenders, in addition to physical and sexual violence, cyber and other forms of violence are used to particularly target, threaten, diminish, silence, humiliate them, very often leveraging gender norms as a weapon. So what we mean here is labeling them bad mothers, whores, crazy women, threatening their children with rape or murder. Gendered norms, discrimination, and indeed violence intersect with all kinds of workplaces where we design projects, where we staff our projects, where we have opportunity for different opportunities or pay or ability to be safe at work. And we looked in particular at, in this publication, and we have a whole section on recommendations on this as food for thought, a place to start, where we're looking through the project cycle and really trying to understand where specifically these kinds of issues can be anchored, again, in an effort to first do no harm, which is a principle, a guiding principle for many of us and in these environment frameworks and spheres, and then do better, which is essentially the definition of a gender responsive approach. Next slide, please. So in our publication, it was not our original goal to document promising practice, and good thing, because very little is actually documented on this. But as we went, we certainly attempted everywhere we could to establish an understanding of where strategies were working. And so we can point to a couple of things with certainty as being very good practice to raise awareness around, consider applying, adapting, replicating. First and foremost, and I have to underscore this, gender matters. When we spend time anchoring this powerful gender language in our environmental frameworks, in our organizational enabling environments, in our projects, in our funding, this makes a difference. This gives us that foothold to be able to pay special attention, ensure we're doing no harm, strengthen our safeguards and standards, invest appropriately with a gender lens to be able, again, to do better. We can see across organizations that investing in gender unlocks a door to be able to invest in understanding gender-based barriers, risks, and enabling conditions. We can see that strengthening gender policies, safeguards, and standards matters. We can see that although it is very context-specific, this relationship between secure land tenure and rights and gender-based violence has a lot of dynamics here that are complicated to get into in this short time. But essentially, a takeaway is securing equitable land and resource rights is a very good safeguard against gender-based violence. The importance of championing, investing in, and supporting women's collective agency and action is hugely important. From work in the Women's Caucus to supporting and building the social capital around women's collective bargaining power, facilitating representation across all levels and all different kinds of contexts. Not just about women, empowering men, engaging them as partners, seeing men as agents of change in the fight for gender equality and safety, and also understanding that women are not the only ones who experience violence. And finally, we learned a lot through the literature review of so many promising practices from across other sectors, in particular from humanitarian and disaster resilience spheres, that we in conservation and sustainable development sectors or spheres can really learn and apply. And the importance of collaborating across sectors. I know we're going to hear from some other speakers that have particular experience in this, and it's something that we see over and over again when we include diverse women, gender stakeholders, GBV experts as part of our stakeholders, as part of our project design, as part of our beneficiaries. This really has an impact. Next slide. So we go through a range of recommendations in the publication. I'm just going to go through these extremely briefly because I've mentioned these and I want to get to the next slide. Essentially, you know, the first step we know is that we have, well, in the last couple of decades, we've done a lot, haven't we, to really understand gender and environment links. And now we know we need to take a step further and build more awareness and capacity on understanding gender-based violence as a part of that equation, a fundamental part of that picture. We need to do a better job including GBV specifically throughout the project cycle, in gender analyses, in risks assessments. We need to establish protocols and safeguards in our organization to be able to anticipate better and respond to violence that is happening already. Building cross-sectoral partnerships, identifying and strengthening the access to and use of tools that already exist. And I'm going to go to the next slide because this is what we're already attempting to do. As we were going through the research process, again, combing through literally thousands of materials, we thought, wouldn't it be so nice if everyone could get access to these materials? So we have curated a library and we have just launched a new knowledge platform we call the GBV Environment Center, centering attention and resources and time and mindful attention to understand and address these linkages. If you come to our website, you can find, for example, all these curated resources. You can use, access, download, use our infographics, put them in your presentations. You can see snapshots of promising practice. You can even click a button and ask for technical support, and we'll do our best to match you with the right expert or maybe answer a question, point you in the right direction of resources, and also invite your feedback on how a knowledge platform like this can be useful to you. Next slide. And on our knowledge platform, we're also already actively launching new tools. So actually, in honor of 16 days, just this week, we've launched a new information note on gender-based violence and environment links during COVID-19. This is available in English. The previous version was available in Spanish. We're working to translate this. We have a new issue brief, 2-pager. The publication is available in Spanish, and on Human Rights Day, December 10th, it will launch in French. And we're also really proud to work with a wide range of IUCN members as they build their own awareness and tools around these issues. So for example, this week, Conservation International just launched their brand new tool to recognize and respond to GBV in community conservation. Invite you, please, to share with us your issues, your resources, if you have them. We're building out a webinar series through next year, so hope we can take this, we sincerely hope this is just the first part of a conversation that we can continue to have. So I want to turn the floor to my wonderful colleague, Laura, who's been working with many of you in the context of post-2020, to talk a little bit more about how we're thinking about these issues informing the post-2020 process before us. Thank you so much. And Laura, to you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Women for Biodiversity, for having us and inviting us. We're very excited to be here. So I hope that as you all were listening to the outcomes and the findings from our report, that you heard some key words or some ideas that really remind you of the work already being done within the CBD. So as Kate made clear, we do want to recognize that a lot of progress has been made in the last decades on policy recognition of the link between gender and the environment. The CBD has been a leading convention on this, with many mandates recognizing this link. It's important to continue using this policy space to elevate issues of gender integration and recognition of the myriad of ways the environment and biodiversity is linked to gender, and this includes gender-based violence. We should use our role as experts and decision makers and advocates to continue identifying gaps and ways the Secretariat and parties can fill these gaps. We would love to use the discussion time today to really hear from you all about your experiences and your reflections on what organizations and institutions should do to strengthen policy and programming, key opportunities and new gaps that you all have identified. First, to make sure the link is more clear and explicit, I thought I'd go through ideas that we have on how learning captured in our report is relevant to the CBD. So within the 2030 action targets, all 3 areas of the targets could integrate gender-based violence considerations. Within the first area, reducing threats to biodiversity, Target 7 specifically touches on environmental stressors or climate change and mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. As we found, and as Kate mentioned, GBV can be exacerbated in contexts of environmental stressors, including climate change. So mitigation and adaptation efforts have the opportunity to appreciate the potential for addressing gender-based violence simultaneously, or at minimum, ensure efforts do not contribute to violent dynamics that might already be taking place, or likely are, as Kate mentioned. In the second area of targets, or meeting people's needs through sustainable use and benefit sharing, there's a very clear overarching link to gender-based violence, as our report found that gender-based violence is employed as a form of socioeconomic control to maintain or promote unequal power dynamics related to accessing, using, controlling, and benefiting from natural resources. This recognition could specifically be integrated in some form into Target 8, which focuses on ensuring benefits for people, especially the most vulnerable. And finally, the third area, tools and solutions for implementation and mainstreaming. Target 20, which focuses on decision-making related to biodiversity and ensuring the rights over relevant resources of Indigenous peoples and local communities, touches on our findings linked to violence directed toward women's environmental defenders and control of land by Indigenous peoples. So there's another potential link to be made there. All these items are key opportunities for gender-based violence integration, or GBV integration. There are also many others. For example, we could use the Escazú Agreement as an example for the CBD to follow, as it does a great job of opening discussion on how defenders are targets of violence. The CBD, among its many cross-cutting issues, also includes 2 issues which have a clear link to GBV, specifically under protected areas, which can be linked to our findings again of violence directed towards environmental defenders and indigenous peoples, and also sustainable use, which has a clear connection to decisions made around access to and control of resources. Again, a dynamic that we found to sometimes run into the territory of GBV and gender-based violence. Of course, as we mentioned, we're always looking to gather more evidence of these connections, and we look forward to learning from the perspectives of others. Bearing in mind this potential, for integrating violent GBV into the CBD frameworks and efforts, what are some specific opportunities for integrating GBV in the policy space? We've come up with a few opportunities and ideas around potential integration. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, the Gender Plan of Action is a clear space for appreciating gender-based violence. Under, for example, this draft action area, there's this draft objective touching on reducing risks to women environmental defenders. We think language on this objective could be stronger. For example, reduced risks could be changed to protect and undertake robust measures to support women environmental and human rights defenders. It's important to recognize the severity and the prevalence of GBV from urban to rural and its impact on women. We also note here that GBV is a rights violation and should not only be considered in the context of biodiversity and sustainable use. That could be expanded. There's also a request in the draft action plan asking for other objectives and action areas. We suggest that these action areas or objectives make it more clear how drivers of biodiversity loss are linked to different forms of violence against women and girls, with a particular focus on the bodily and psychological integrity of Indigenous women and men and environmental and human rights defenders. Finally, another opportunity is to ensure any capacity building efforts or tools include practical guidance on how to include GBV considerations in activities. Next slide, please. We also found a few opportunities for including mention of GBV content in the updated 0 draft of the framework. This includes recognizing the relevance of GBV to implementation support mechanisms and in establishing enabling conditions for the work that falls under the framework. We want to emphasize here how an important first step for most working in this space, if not all, is to ensure a baseline of understanding of the link to GBV. This baseline could be established through capacity building efforts. In terms of enabling conditions, we considered the possibility of reminding parties and the Secretariat that assurance of safety and safeguards in place to identify and prevent violence, and at minimum provide support to survivors and victims, is important in all workplaces and is relevant to this area of work. Of course, just a few days ago, the Executive Secretary of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice released a note on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework with a review of the updated goals and targets and related indicators and baselines. The note did not include much mention of gender and no mention of gender-based violence, but these are some ideas that we think are illustrative of opportunity for inclusion of GBV. Next slide, please. So within the draft monitoring framework, this is one indicator we had proposed to be included in the framework. The recently, again, released proposed headline indicators for the framework from the SBA or Substa does not include this indicator. That is unsurprising, as target 2.4 was not in this new document. We hope, though, that the above on this slide is a helpful example of a first step in including indicators to monitor GBV prevalence through this policy space. Next slide. So other than these specific opportunities for comment, we should also be elevating gender-based violence in discussions and forum spaces with parties and the Secretariat. There are, of course, challenges we face when doing these sorts of activities, which include sometimes a need to convince our own colleagues that there is this type of link, and despite providing comments and feedback, the feedback does not get picked up. We also recognize that we ourselves are not experts on GBV alone, and we do recognize that these connections are very complex. We appreciate that that maybe we shouldn't jump right into recommending a new target to the Secretariat that focuses solely on GBV. Our recommendations, we think, should really start with simply building the capacity of parties and the Secretariat on these links, or a request for support to build more knowledge, all to start the groundwork for generating common understanding and collaboration with a plan to eventually move towards investment. Of course, we're also very excited to hear from all of you about your experiences and your recommendations for aligning our messages and our work to really elevate voices and to get the same messages across. Thank you all again, and we're very excited for the discussion portion of today to really be able to hear from you all about your thoughts and your own recommendations for working together. Thanks.
Thanks. I don't know whether you can hear me. I'm going to keep this. Thank you very much, Laura and Kate, for giving this really good overview of the issue itself, and also some very concrete recommendations. And I think these are very, and if Mr. Basil is still online, we really hope that these concrete recommendations could go forward in some of the upcoming upcoming sessions that are being planned, including the One Health, and also the relevance of having this supported in the Substa and the SBI that is being planned. We'll hope to keep some more of these discussions forward, but we are losing time. So I'm going to quickly invite Bharti ji, our next presenter, to already be online. So, okay, okay, I can see this. So what the second one is, the first one we tried to do was to give a broad analysis of the issue and its linkages with the environment. This session, we have two of our colleagues who will be sharing what's happening at the ground and their experiences. So first, I'm very happy to welcome Bharti ji, who is the chairperson of FECOFUN. FECOFUN is the Federation of Community Forestry User Groups in Nepal. And she is also the gender policy and advocacy contact person there. And what she will be also be talking about is FECOFUN was also partnered with the project of USAID, which and also contributed to one of the case studies in the IUCN publication itself. So Bharti will also be coming with that perspective of that case study and looking at the issue of gender-based violence in the community forestry sector in Nepal, and including also sharing what they are doing on the ground. And after that, we will have a presentation by Ruth, who is from the indigenous peoples, Esa Eja peoples from Cien Inferino, the Amazonian region of Peru. And she's also the secretary of the board director of FANAMAD. So first, I would like to invite Bharti ji, and you have 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina ji, moderator. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Bharti Pathak. I'm a chairperson of the Federation of Community Forest Users Nepal. I'm working since 25 years in community forestry movement in Nepal. So I have a short time. I learned two more things from the before presentation, Laura presentation. I got a chance for the update for the globally and the very strong recommendation. So I'm going to present especially focused to my experience, my organization experience in the very grassroots level. We are working more than 22,000 community forest users group in grassroots level, directly affiliated to the around the 1,100, many people, half population are affiliated with the community forestry movement. So I'm highlighting to the first presentation the especially issues of the gender-based violence in the forest sector, not only community forestry. Is the community forest users group are very model. There is the very good practice, very equal representation for the women and men, and the marginalized group and the ethnic group are in the community forestry leadership position. So I'm going to brief in the all forest sector and natural resource sector in gender-based violence, especially 68% population of Nepal in depending the firewood for the cooking and energy, and especially women are very vulnerable, namely during the collection of the firewood from the forest area. In the not only Nepal, especially Asian country, many women are working in the home, and that they collect to the firewood and grasses and the fodder and the many livestock and grazing their cattle and the jungle. So they are the many overloaded. One is the protect the forest, and another is they have a many loaded for the housework and other things. So another issues for the legal loggers frequently attempt to attack the women who challenge them due to the patrolling in community forestry. This is the very big issues. I'm going to linkage to the Haryovan case studies. There is not a highlighted to that cases before the I think maybe 10 years, and the community forestry chairperson, she was the women in the western region. She went in the forest area and the evening time. That time is the patrolling attacking to the her like a cut the hand, and that time is the very very big serious issues in Nepal. And we are advocating from the FECOFUN side, especially who are working in the gender-based violence issues, and all are advocating to and many gender-friendly policies and the act. And that time is she's only got some resource, but not punishment and everybody. So that types issues are facing to the grassroots women who are working in the forest area. I have a very short time. I'm going to very short presentation. And the forest dependent and the rural women are still taking part in the decision making, very they are in the decision making process, but not a meaningful participation, or only issues for the participation, but not effective manner benefit sharing, and forest resource is still equitable. Is the all natural resource. Some are in the community forest users group. There is the trying to equal benefit sharing, but all over the forest resource they cannot access for the women and the marginalized group and the indigenous community and other ethnic community. And similarly, hesitating the accept the women leadership in some of the community institutions due to the unequitable social power structure and the very our patriarchal society is not accepting easily. I am leading in the all over the country, like a 22,000 community forestry users group. I am leading in the central level, but not accepting, not easily, not all are inviting to the participation, but not is the a decision making process, not recognize the voice for the women. So that is the issues are facing to the many women in grassroots level, who are spending more time in the forest protection and the biodiversity protection, very linkage to the issues for the water and land and the forest, very 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 interlinked, and they are conserving, they are protecting, but no access, no recognizing. So only who are raising the voice for the not participation, secure the rights for the in the legally. So that is the very important. So I'm going to another like I'm saying to the like a security and the raise the voice for the women in the forest sector, in natural resource sector. Another is the like a problem for the women is the different type. Our culture also not accepting the women very easily. So is the they cannot contribute. They are very interested. Women are grassroots women are very interested contribution in the socially and leadership and everything, but culture is not accepting easily, and they cannot facing, and they are like our policy, especially in Nepal, our policy is the highlighting the women representation community forestry guideline, but other policy and act also not easily accepting the women's issues. And similarly, another problem are facing in the grassroots women, very poor for the women, but we can have more focus to the grassroots women, economically like a weakness for the women's grassroots women, and so they have no access for the natural resource and the forest resource, so violence due to their poor economic condition. So we are facing, we are like that types of the issues, many grassroots women. And grassroots women have prominent role for the environmental service, but no access to PES, not only PES, I say to the like all over the natural resource, and no access for the land access, and no access for the other forests like a timber, non-timber, like they are planting to the different types of the species in the forest sector and community forestry and other protected area, but and the benefit sharing time and no decision, no inviting to the women. So that issues are facing still in the our country also. And another is the lack of the localization of the SDG, not only SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. I was saying to like a 17 goal and many target, but grassroots women are unknown. And what types of the issues will be discussed in the globally, like a climate change issues and SDG and the like different types of the global agenda. Nobody aware about this. So that is also challenges, and they cannot raise to the voice. So next, please, next. So these and I'm going to present effort of the community forestry. You know, is the community forestry users group are very pioneer in Nepal, and the community forestry and opportunity to challenges in GBD. And this is the very big civil society and sustainable organization institution in grassroots level. And before the I think maybe 12, 15 years, we raised to the voice for the to the government. We have already in FECOFUN 50% representation in the every structure and decision-making process, but government are not taking to the ownership. So that time we raised to the voice. And the need to educative body and the community, not only educative body and the women and the other groups need very necessary for the representation. And that time government made by the community forestry guideline. So we are working based on the community forestry guideline. There is the highlighted to the women representation in decision-making process. And another is the more supporting to the poor people and natural resource and equal benefit sharing. So we are very rich in the policy, but practically is not practice. Not a very well implementation in grassroots level. We are raising to voice is the very, we have a policy, but we need to implementation part very effectively. We are suggesting. And in this time, we made a forest act, new forest act. We raised to the voice in the FECOFUN and the other stakeholders who are leading from the FECOFUN side. And in this time, and the forest act highlighted to allocate the resource for women economic empowerment, especially grassroots women economic empowerment through the community forestry. Like there is the biodiversity issues, there is the other land issues, there is the everything, there is the many types of the resource, and government are allocating the budget hopefully we can go together, like many supported organization project are also supporting this movement. And another is the community forest has generated the large number of gender championer. This is the very good example. I don't know is the IUCN publication highlighted to this or not, but we are empowering to not only women, but we feel, and the men and women is together, and we are like a train, and we are together in men and women championer against the gender-based violence. So, and all over the country and community level. So similarly, CFUG have been regularly organizing to the local level and campaign for against the gender-based violence, and since long time, and awareness raising and capacity building and that types of stuff. And another is the FECOFUN role model CSOs. Provision of the practice of equal representation women, I already mentioned. Now is the more than 100,000 women are in leadership position in the community forest users group and the FECOFUN. Just I'm saying to the leading role. And another is the policy advocacy for gender mainstreaming in the forest, environment, and biodiversity related policy. Every time we are advocating to the many success stories in the Nepal. So another is the development of the women leadership in social capital. More than 1,000 women are elected community forestry leader in the local government, and they are making to the policy. Different is the against we are making to the task force group in the under the local government, and the community forest users group and other stakeholders were inviting there, and the community forestry users group elected women are playing to the very good role in the local government policy making process. Hopefully in the community forestry practice will be incorporated in the local government policy making process. This is the example for the community for campaign against gender-based violence, and different description for the different picture. So I'm not going to describe about this picture. So this is the our commitment in institutionally. Every more than 22,000 community forest users group are committed to that points. This is our publication supported by the Haryoban project, and we are preparing to this. Here is the many commitment institutionally and individually who are in the community forestry movement, who are in the against the gender violence, gender-based violence. So we are distributing to that types of the publication. Next. So we are recommended to some points in here and the future. I learned two more things before Laura presentation, especially strong commitment for the gender response action through out the new CBD Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and monitoring effectiveness and including the SDG achievement. And another is the exchange, the sharing, the success stories of community campaigns against the GBV, particularly in forest and biodiversity sector. And the national level, effective implementation of the constitutional and policy commitment from the government and policymaker, and constitution in the capacity building for the organizations CSOs campaign against the gender-based violence. And the community level, organizing the mobilization of community campaign through the community forest users group, more than 22,000 community forest users group against the GBV, and the policy, legal awareness, and reduce the other elements in GBV. So this is our recommendation, and we are going to on grassroots level. We are already our government are already federal structure, so making to the 3-tier government in policy, in local government and province government and federal government. So many issues also facing I left the issues for not only community forest area and national park area. Women are facing to the many challenges, and sometimes is the wildlife conflict, sometimes is the poaching, sometimes is the army cases, and that types issues are facing. And now we are raising the voice for the national park issues. So we are thinking to very seriously when making the policy, and that time like a more focus to the gender-based violence issues, not only alone and only institution. We need to together, and the global framework making time. That time is the need to think in very seriously issues for the women and the gender issues, and the who are marginalized people, who are playing to the very strong role in the protection of the forest and biodiversity. And that person, that institution, that community need to highlight it in the framework making process. So I heartily request, I heartily recommend it, that recommendation. Thank you so much. I think maybe I crossed the time or not. If you have any question and queries, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bharti. That was very inspirational, and thank you for a very strong message. So without further ado, we will have a dialogue session, hopefully for at least half an hour. So without losing any more time, I would like to actually, our speaker, Ruth, is having a connection problem. So in her place, we will have Claudia Galvez, who's also from FANAMAD, who will be reading her presentation out. So Amelia, just let me know if Claudia is online, and I will.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to run your presentation right away.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, well, first of all, good morning to everyone. And we are sorry that Vanessa has some problems with the connection, internet connection. She is in her community. So I will speak, I will take the presentation that she prepares. In Spanish, because it's written in Spanish, and it's violencia de género y vínculos con el medio ambiente en Madre de Dios. Next. Esta es la estructura de la organización de FANAMAD, donde tenemos en la base, que es lo que alimenta la organización, 37 comunidades nativas. Estas 37 comunidades nativas, hay 7 pueblos indígenas, 4 naciones territoriales, que son los pueblos Eseja, Arakbut, Maxigenga y Guine. Las naciones son territorios integrales ancestrales y que incluyen varias de las comunidades, de las 37 comunidades, ¿no? Son territorios más extensos. Después, el anterior, por favor. Tenemos, tenemos también 2 organizaciones. Okay. How do I do to get the channel in English, so that people can understand what I'm saying?
Oh, okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So please, everybody, because I'm doing, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a screen. Let me just see whether I can show it here. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a sign that has a globe on it. If you see that, please click on it, and it should show you an option for Spanish.
Okay.
If you switch there, then you'll have the Spanish translation.
Yeah, can I go on? Okay. So then we have, sorry, entonces tenemos 2 organizaciones técnicas, AFIMAD y ELECA Maracaeri. AFIMAD se encarga más de los proyectos productivos y ELECA Maracaeri representa a 10 comunidades que se han agrupado para formar un ejecutor de contrato de administración de un área protegida, que en Perú tenemos una categoría que se llama reservas comunales, que es una categoría que representa o protege los territorios tradicionales indígenas. Luego están dos organizaciones políticas intermedias. Una se llama COINBAMAT, que es el Consejo Indígena de la Parte Baja de Madre de Dios, que representa comunidades nativas, 17 comunidades nativas en la zona del río Bajo Madre de Dios. Y el COARYIMA, que es el Consejo Arak Bine Machienga, que representa las 17 comunidades de la parte alta de la cuenca del río Madre de Dios, de la parte alta de la cuenca. Luego está, y nosotros que es la FANAMAD. La situación de la mujer indígena en Madre de Dios. Pues aquí tenemos, estos son los principales temas que hemos englobado, que son los que representan cuál es la situación actual. Hay mucha similitud entre las previas presentaciones con la realidad que estamos viendo en Madre de Dios. También tenemos, por ejemplo, el tema de la defensa del territorio, donde las mujeres están cada vez más tomando una acción más constante. Antiguamente solamente los hombres eran los que trabajaban más o eran los que defendían los territorios. Ahora hay muchas mujeres que están metiéndose en ese tema. Es más, hay una comunidad, como en 3 islas, donde las mujeres son las que realmente han sacado invasores mineros, ¿no? Sin embargo, la realidad en Madre de Dios es diferente porque como hay 7 pueblos, cada pueblo tiene realidades internas diferentes, entonces no todos los pueblos reaccionan de la misma manera ante las diferentes situaciones que existen. En la defensa del territorio, las mujeres en algunos pueblos están muy activas, como mencionábamos, pero también en algunos otros pueblos, por ejemplo, se nota que hay algunos celos de los hombres cuando las mujeres intervienen mucho, ¿no? Sin embargo, es un espacio que cada vez está ganando. Incluso en la Federación Nativa, el área de territorio, que es el área que ve este tema de defensa del territorio en la FENAMAD, tradicionalmente era liderado por hombres, y desde el 2019 la responsabilidad ha recaído en una dirigente mujer, lo cual es como un hito, ¿no?, en la organización. Y lo está haciendo muy bien. Después está el otro tema de la toma de decisiones sobre recursos naturales y otros, que es muy restringida, porque en las comunidades normalmente las personas que toman las decisiones para los recursos naturales y el territorio son los hombres. Y otra vez, cada vez más las mujeres quieren entrar a participar mejor, pero para esto necesitan estar mejor informadas. Entonces, hay uno de los problemas que ellas visualizan es que no están muy bien informadas para poder participar de mejor manera en las reuniones comunales. Cuando no están muy bien informadas, los hombres a veces se burlan de ellas, o de repente no les dan mucho espacio, o no las valoran mucho, no las quieren tomar en cuenta, ¿no? Actividades extractivas y llegada de gente externa. Este es un tema también muy, muy grave, porque en Madre de Dios hay las actividades extractivas a nivel de Perú, en verdad, están promovidas por el gobierno. Como el gobierno promueve las actividades extractivas, hay una proliferación en Madre de Dios de la minería y de la tala ilegal, ¿no? Y en el caso de la minería, muchas veces esta actividad, cuando hay personas, sobre todo hombres, que llegan a las comunidades, y no solamente impacta en la estructura de la comunidad, en la estructura política de la comunidad, sino también hay casos de mujeres que son embarazadas, jóvenes, ¿no?, mujeres jóvenes, que son tomadas como parejas momentáneas por estas personas que quieren y están buscando usar los recursos de la comunidad, y las dejan después de un tiempo que han usado los recursos y se van, las dejan chicas embarazadas, ¿no? La comunidad a veces con las mismas mujeres se sienten un poco como avergonzadas, y no hacen no se genera ninguna acción hacia estas cosas, ¿no?, estos temas que están sucediendo. La minería, anterior, por favor. Anterior. La minería, la madera y el impacto en la vida comunal es lo que me estaba mencionando, que también eso genera mucho cambio en la estructura de la comunidad. El cambio cultural, que tiene que ver mucho también como los jóvenes, sobre todo, pero todos en la comunidad, pero los jóvenes mayormente están cambiando mucho, se están volviendo más consumistas, hay mayor contacto con gente externa, con la misma gente de esas actividades que entran a la comunidad y que traen patrones nuevos culturales, el acceso a medios de comunicación, y eso está generando una pérdida de la cultura, donde el rol de la mujer es importantísimo, porque la mujer es, el hombre también, pero la mujer sobre todo tiene un rol muy, muy importante en la transmisión de los aspectos culturales. El cambio climático también, porque el cambio climático está afectando, aunque en la selva, en Madre de Dios, en la Amazonía, todavía no está sintiéndose como en otros lados del mundo, que hay una escasez fuertísima de recursos, ya se está empezando a sentir, ¿no? Entonces, por ejemplo, no solamente afecta en el tema de la agricultura y de los productos de la chacra, que ya están viendo las mujeres afectadas en la seguridad y soberanía alimentaria, porque ya algunos cultivos están malográndose en el sentido de que se pudren por el exceso de lluvias o las inundaciones, sino también está afectando los recursos del bosque. Entonces, cuando hablamos de seguridad y soberanía alimentaria, no solamente estamos hablando de la chacra, sino también de estos recursos que están en la fauna y la flora del bosque, y el cambio climático está afectando también en la fenología de las épocas de reproducción de los animales y las plantas, lo cual afecta a la población que depende de estos recursos, ¿no? Las políticas y programas del Estado no contemplan participación de mujeres ni su perspectiva propia, porque en verdad todos los programas que se están dando están más orientados a, primero que nada, a las propuestas que el mismo Estado o gobierno hace, pensando en qué es lo mejor para las comunidades, y segundo, no se contempla el rol de la mujer, o la perspectiva de la mujer. Entonces, en ese sentido, están los planes de vida de las comunidades, donde las mujeres están participando bastante en la elaboración de sus propios planes de vida, para que ellos mismos en la comunidad identifiquen cuál es esa mirada, de acuerdo a su cosmovisión, cuál es el desarrollo que ellos quieren plantear, y también cómo la mujer participa más en la planificación de la comunidad y cómo participa más en los espacios de decisión de la comunidad, y que cada vez más también estas propuestas para mejorar o fortalecer la economía indígena en las comunidades incorpore también la mirada de las mujeres, desde la perspectiva de las mujeres, cómo es que ellas quieren también contribuir, y las mujeres son actores importantes para fortalecer la economía en las comunidades, pero son actores que no están muy bien valorados. Next, please. ¿Cómo afecta la situación actual a las mujeres indígenas de Madre de Dios? Lo que antes se ha mencionado, afecta porque se profundiza más la inequidad y desigualdad de oportunidades para la mujer. Las mujeres también baja la autoestima y hay una mayor inseguridad, ¿no? Porque ellas sienten que ellas tienen un rol que no está siendo valorado, y sienten, ¿cómo se llama?, que nadie las toma en cuenta o no se les toma en cuenta. Otra vez menciono que esto no sucede en todos los pueblos. Hay pueblos como que las mujeres han tomado un liderazgo muy fuerte y están mucho más involucradas en la toma de decisiones, pero hay otros pueblos todavía donde las mujeres quizás todavía no les están dando mucho espacio. Pérdida de cultura y costumbres. Ya lo mencionamos también, este es un tema muy importante y muy preocupante, porque no solamente se trata de que se pierda la lengua, que es lo primero que se pierde también, sino se está perdiendo mucho de la perspectiva indígena que se tiene hacia el territorio. Por ejemplo, al perder los aspectos culturales, se pierde esa idea de que el territorio es un bien común, es un bien de toda la comunidad. Y lo que sucede ahí también es que entonces se empiezan a tomar decisiones individuales de las personas, los miembros de la comunidad. Las mujeres ahí son las que tienen en realidad una voz más de unificación. Las mujeres normalmente, cuando se habla mucho del tema de recursos naturales y de territorio, suelen tener una mirada más integrada y más de unificar la comunidad, ¿no? Entonces, la pérdida de cultura y de esos patrones culturales que antes llevaban a la comunidad a tomar decisiones de una decisión en conjunto, se está perdiendo, y eso repercute mucho en conservación de los bosques y en la calidad de vida de las personas en la comunidad. Abusos sexuales. En Madre de Dios, lo que más se da, como digo, lo que ya dijimos, es el impacto sobre estas personas externas que entran por los recursos naturales a las comunidades nativas, y la manera que tienen de entrar es a través de las mujeres muchas veces. También se da el caso opuesto de mujeres de mujeres de fuera que entran también a la comunidad a través de los hombres, emparejándose con hombres, pero la mayoría de casos son mujeres jóvenes, ¿no? Que son abusadas a veces, que son embarazadas por estos trabajadores de la minería y de la madera. La pérdida de diversidad biológica. Este es un tema muy importante porque muchas de las especies de animales, de fauna que se están perdiendo, son parte de la economía indígena de las comunidades. Por ejemplo, hay pérdida de muchas especies de monos o primates, taricaya, que es una tortuga acuática, son base de la seguridad y soberanía alimentaria de las comunidades. Entonces, la pérdida de diversidad biológica no solamente es un aspecto que importa desde el punto de vista de la conservación de los bosques, sino también es muy importante y relevante desde el punto de vista de la seguridad y soberanía alimentaria para las comunidades nativas, y obviamente también porque la pérdida de diversidad biológica empobrece los bosques, ¿no? Y un bosque empobrecido es un bosque que va a dar menos soporte a las comunidades para enfrentar los efectos del cambio climático. La seguridad y soberanía alimentaria, relacionada a lo anterior, también aparte de la pérdida de algunas especies de flora, de fauna, sobre todo de fauna que hemos mencionado, también está afectando los cultivos, como ya se mencionó, los cultivos en la chacra. Por eso es importante también que se rescaten, ¿no?, y se revaloren los cultivos tradicionales, se han perdido bastantes, porque estos cultivos tradicionales están más preparados o son más resilientes hacia los efectos del cambio climático en un escenario futuro donde en la Amazonía hay una tendencia a que los bosques de repente se sabanicen o pierdan en la composición y haya más sequías. Es muy importante que los pueblos indígenas y sobre todo las mujeres tienen un rol muy importante ahí en el mantenimiento de los cultivos tradicionales, mantengan, valga la redundancia, estos cultivos para poder estar mejor preparados, ¿no? También está el tema de la contaminación de mercurio. La minería trae también la contaminación de las aguas y de los peces, sobre todo, los peces, y los peces son base de la alimentación, de la seguridad alimentaria y de la soberanía alimentaria, ¿no?, de los pueblos indígenas. Y esta contaminación con mercurio, lo que estamos viendo es que no hay ningún estudio en realidad a largo plazo ni mediano plazo en general, pero ya los pueblos indígenas están viendo que el mercurio está afectando con algunos problemas en el nacimiento de algunos niños, por ejemplo, que nacen con algunas malformaciones. Entonces ya esta contaminación de mercurio limita el consumo de los peces y reduce, ¿no?, la oferta alimentaria para las comunidades nativas. Enfermedades del COVID-19, el dengue también en Madre de Dios, un problema muy fuerte, aparte de lo que ha sucedido últimamente a nivel mundial con el COVID, es el dengue, ¿no? Es una enfermedad que cada vez se aumenta por el tema de la minería, y también afecta mucho a jóvenes, niños y mujeres, ¿no?, sobre todo mujeres embarazadas. Entonces es un tema que las mujeres también están tomando muy en cuenta. Enfermedades femeninas también por causa del calor excesivo, como consecuencia del cambio climático. Hay mujeres que tienen más enfermedades, han aumentado enfermedades femeninas, ¿no? Next. El trabajo que está realizando la FANAMAD desde el área mujer, liderado por Vanessa Arracua, y también hay una dirigente, Violeta Irey, que son dos mujeres que trabajan en el tema de la agenda mujer. Hay una agenda que se terminó de realizar el año pasado. Esta agenda tiene varios puntos, pero los puntos más importantes que se quieren trabajar para el final de este año, o que se han venido trabajando ya, más bien dicho, es la agenda para el apoyo humanitario por COVID, con las huertas familiares para la seguridad alimentaria. Entonces, uno de los temas que se ha trabajado mucho con el COVID-19 es fortalecer la seguridad alimentaria en las comunidades. El COVID nos ha demostrado la dependencia de muchas comunidades nativas hacia productos ya procesados que vienen de fuera. Y eso es una debilidad para las comunidades. Lo que ha tratado de hacer desde el área mujer es fortalecer un grupo de mujeres con estas huertas familiares, dando semillas de productos que no solamente son tradicionales, sino también otros que van a contribuir a que la nutrición sea esté mejor complementada, pero también la valoración y el rescate de estos cultivos tradicionales. Y estas huertas familiares, semilleras, las están trabajando las mujeres en algunas comunidades. No se ha podido trabajar en todas las comunidades, sino en algunas por la disponibilidad de fondos, pero se está tratando de promover y se va a seguir promoviendo esto en los próximos años, ¿no? El fortalecimiento de capacidades de liderazgo de mujeres, que es muy importante y que se viene ya trabajando con algunas lideresas, pero es muy importante que las mujeres también estén mejor informadas, ¿no? Para que puedan tener una participación más acertada en los diferentes espacios que están buscando tener. La vigilancia del territorio, que también es importante, y en esta época del COVID cobró mucho más importancia que nunca, porque en estos momentos del COVID, al menos en la región de Madre de Dios, las autoridades, como todas las instancias del Estado, estaban cerradas por el COVID, por la cuarentena que dictaminó el Estado. Entonces no había ninguna instancia del Estado que podía ayudar a ver las invasiones a los territorios. En las comunidades, entonces FENAMAD tiene un programa que se llama la Veeduría Forestal Comunitaria, que es un programa que promueve en las comunidades la vigilancia comunitaria. Bueno, no promueve, sino más bien responde a un llamado de las comunidades. Las comunidades quieren proteger sus territorios y siempre acuden a la federación para el apoyo, y dada esa necesidad de las comunidades de vigilar el territorio, es que nacen estos proyectos de veeduría forestal comunitaria, donde se fortalece a los comuneros con celulares y con unas técnicas a tiempo real para que puedan ellos indicar a la federación cuando están siendo invadidos. Y ahí estamos trabajando también desde el área mujer para que mujeres también sean veedoras o vigilantes del territorio. Ya hay algunas mujeres que están participando muy bien, de una manera muy positiva, en la vigilancia de sus territorios. Está la recuperación de especies de flora y fauna, también un grupo de mujeres que están muy preocupadas. Por ejemplo, hemos tenido ya experiencias con ellas mismas de las comunidades donde FENAMAD, a través del área mujer, fortalece técnicamente para, técnicamente para, ¿cómo se llama? La recuperación de algunas especies de fauna, por ejemplo, como la taricaya, quelónido, esa tortuga acuática, que es importante para la seguridad alimentaria, y también algunas especies de flora, que es importante para el tejido de los techos, que las mujeres muchas veces se dedican a eso. Después está la participación en espacios a nivel nacional e internacional. La Vanessa, por ejemplo, y otras lideresas, 2 lideresas más, han participado en la COP climática del año pasado, y cada vez se está tratando de que, antiguamente, por ejemplo, a estas COP climáticas iban hombres, dirigentes hombres, ¿no? Entonces las mujeres están tratando cada vez más de entrar a estos espacios y llevando la voz y las propuestas desde la mujer. Entonces la agenda que se ha elaborado, las mujeres han elaborado en diferentes talleres, han recogido mucho de las situaciones actuales que están las mujeres, que las mujeres han pedido muchas cosas para poder fortalecerse, y esta agenda es la que se está implementando. Next, please. Bueno, y el mensaje que Vanessa había pensado con Violeta, las 2 dirigentes, es quizás valorar a la mujer, ¿no? Y reconocer su rol en la conservación de la diversidad biológica y el desarrollo de las comunidades, que todavía aún este rol debe ser más valorado y realmente interiorizado en las comunidades, quizás. Buscar la equidad e igualdad de género basados en la cultura, porque a veces también se nota que muchas veces a las mujeres un poco les dan espacios, pero como por compromiso, y no realmente por no hay realmente un enfoque real para la equidad de oportunidades, ¿no? a las mujeres. Y bueno, relacionado a lo anterior, mejorar las oportunidades para las mujeres. Sobre todo, las mujeres quieren mejorar sus oportunidades, no solamente en los espacios de participación, eso es importantísimo, sino también en las actividades económicas para fortalecer la economía, y ellas tienen muchos como ideas que ellas quieren trabajar, hacer, y necesitan ser más escuchadas. y participar más en espacios donde ellas puedan poner sus propuestas propias. Next. Gracias.
Thank you, Claudia, for stepping in and for this presentation. So this was the end of a presentation session. So if I could ask all the presenters to put their video on, and we will already, I'm not going to do the summary of it. We will wait until all of this, at the end of the session. But because looking at the time, I will just dive into the dialogue. So what you're going to do that is, so for some of the questions coming up, now I'm finally looking at the screen. Amelia, if you are there, Amelia, can you come online too? So if you have any specific comment, I'm going to leave that in the chat. But if there is any specific question that is there, I am going to look at some questions. So if Amelia, can you help me if you have taken down any questions that have come in, because now I'm going through the whole chat.
Yeah, don't worry, Tina. There's no any question yet. So maybe we can open the flow.
All right.
Stephen.
Great. So I will open the floor, but we have only about like 20 minutes, maximum half an hour from now. So could I ask everybody to put in your question in the chat box so we could look at the questions? Because if I give the floor, then it might take more time. If there's any question from the floor, please feel free to put it in the chat box, please. Looks like everybody has had a good publication. At least I will just say that everybody has got like lots of thanks. Thanks to Laura, and thanks to Kate, and thanks to all the presenters and Bharti ji. So this is a question from Kenneth Johnson, and I don't know. Please also identify if you want a specific panelist to address the question. So the question is that are there significant impacts noted when women participate in protected area management? Is it just a general question you're putting in, or you would want somebody specific to question that? I
think, hello?
Is this, please? Yes.
Sorry. The presenter that I think from Nepal, maybe she can answer the question.
Okay, I was guessing that. Okay, Johnson, thank you so much. Bharti ji, there's a question for you. Are there significant impact noted when women participate in protected area management?
Tina ji, ke question cha mero?
Sarah, if you are there, can you help in the Nepali translation if needed? Are there significant impacts? Are there, if you look at the chat box, are there significant impacts noted when women participate in protected area management? Okay, I think, yeah, Johnson, I think I'll just share one thing is that one of the things
I'm hearing Spanish language, sorry.
Okay, you'll have to switch to English
okay,
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
नेपाली भन्दिन त टिना जी के कुन चाहिँ क्वेशन हो मेरो?
Sarah?
That noted when women participate.
Are there significant impacts noted when women participate?
भन्दै हुनुहुन्छ?
Sarah, the floor is yours.
महिलाहरू चाहिँ नि हाम्रो प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाजमा सहभागी हुँदाखेरि त्यसको के असरहरू छ?
भनेको वुमेनहरुको
संरक्षण क्षेत्रमा
यस म इंग्लिश भन्दिनु ल, म भन्छु है, नेपाली भन्छु ल।
असर छ त तपाईं बिस्तारै भन्नु है।
यसमा खास अघि पनि मैले कुरा उठाएको थिएँ नि, नेशनल पार्क र प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया सेक्टरमा खास गरिकन त्यहाँ बाहिर कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्रीमा भन्दा पनि कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्रीमा त खासै त्यस्तो छैन हैन। कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्री आफैले एक खालको न्यायालयको भूमिका खेल्छ। प्रोटेक्टेड एरियामा चाहिँ वुमेनहरुलाई एकदमै काम गर्न गाह्रो छ। किन भन्दा अब त्यहाँको चाहिँ उनीहरूले अब फायरवुड कलेक्सनको त कुरै छोडौँ, सामान्य भेजिटेबलहरू टिप्न जाँदाखेरि पनि महिलाहरू चाहिँ एकदम धेरै गाली गलौज सुन्नु परेको, कतिपय ठाउँमा चाहिँ महिलाहरूले पिटाइ खाएको त्यस्तो खालको घटनाहरू पनि छ। कतिपय ठाउँमा प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाको वरिपरि नेशनल पार्कको वरिपरि चाहिँ महिलाहरू खास गरिकन उनीहरूको लाइभलीहुडसँग जोडिएको थुप्रै कामहरू हुन्छ, त्यसमा चाहिँ उनीहरूको सेक्युरिटी छैन हैन। उनीहरूको अब उनीहरूप्रति गर्ने व्यवहार, महिलाहरूप्रति गर्ने व्यवहारहरू एकदमै टोटली फरक छ। अहिले पनि मैले केसहरू भने आर्मीबाट पोचिङ हैन, त्यसपछि गएर चाहिँ अब वाइल्ड लाइफ चाहिँ विशेष गरी उसको बालीहरू नजिक हुन्छ, बेसी फार्मरहरू वुमेनहरू हुन्छ, त्यसले गर्दाखेरि त्यसको डाइरेक्ट चाहिँ उनीहरूमाथि चाहिँ धेरै अट्याक भइरहेको हुन्छ महिलाहरूमाथि। कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्रीको त एउटा सक्सेस स्टोरी नै छ, उनीहरूले गरेको त्यहाँ त मेन वुमेनहरू मिलेरै त्यसलाई फेस गर्छ हैन। तर प्रोटेक्टेड एरियामा चाहिँ त्यो खालको समस्याहरू फेस गरिरहेछ।
हुन्छ भारतीजी, म एक्चुअली फेरि रिफ्रेस गर्छु है क्वेसन। यो चाहिँ नि महिलाहरूको सहभागी जहाँ चाहिँ नि संरक्षण क्षेत्रको व्यवस्थापनमा महिलाहरूको सहभागी हुन्छ नि, त्यसको इम्प्याक्ट चाहिँ त्यसको असर चाहिँ के हुँदो रहेछ, के नोट गर्नु छ भनेर सोधिरहेछ उसले।
हैन, संरक्षण क्षेत्रभित्र त महिला हजुर
हजुर त्यही हो क्वेसन।
संरक्षण क्षेत्रभित्र त महिलाहरूको एक्टिभ सहभागिता नै छैन।
व्यवस्थापन गर्ने हैन, म्यानेजमेन्ट गर्ने क्रममा चाहिँ महिलाहरूको सहभागिताले कतिको असर पुर्याउँछ भन्ने कुरा हो कि
हैन। एउटा त प्रोटेक्टेड एरियामा कम्युनिटीकै एक्सेस छैन हैन, लोकल कम्युनिटी इन्डिजिनियस पिपुलहरू वुमेनहरूकै एक्सेस छैन। यदि अहिले प्रोटेक्टेड एरियामा चाहिँ कम्युनिटी कन्जर्भेसन र वुमेनहरूको सहभागिता बढाउने हो भने, जसरी कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्रीमा एउटा राम्रो रोल मोडलको रूपमा महिलाहरूले काम गरेको छ, त्यो कुरा चाहिँ प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाको क्षेत्रहरूमा धेरै गर्न सकिन्थ्यो। त्यसले गर्दाखेरि हामीले चाहिँ नेशनल पार्कको प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाहरूकोमा चाहिँ खास गरिकन त्यहाँ कम्युनिटी ग्रुप्सहरू बनाउने, कम्युनिटी कन्जर्भेसनलाई प्रायोरिटी दिने र वुमेनहरूको पार्टिसिपेसन र उनीहरूको लिडरसिपलाई अगाडि बढाउने हो भने चाहिँ खास गरिकन बाहिर जति चेन्ज देखिएको छ त्यो सेक्टरमा अझ धेरै चेन्जहरू देखाउन चाहिँ सकिन्छ।
ल 1 minute because we're losing time. Sarah, please.
I'm just going to say she's saying that within the protected areas women have no role as such. Within the protected areas management, women have no roles at large because it's generally controlled by the army, militarized. But she recommends that the examples or the success stories that they've had within the forestry sector or within the community forestry sector of women women in leading roles, in decision-making roles, that could be replicated in protected areas as well in the coming days. That she strongly recommends. But as of now, there's no significant role of women in the management of protected areas.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. We'll go to the next question. So yes, please, for the participants, we don't have a Nepali translation because it's very rare to get Nepali translation. So we are doing this right like live here, so it's taking a little bit of time. So hope you've listened to the answer. So there's another question from Martha. Hi, Martha. It says that, are there any women participating in the current BBNJ negotiations? Please let us know. And I think for this would be more directed to IUCN with the BBNG negotiations, because you, so would you like to reflect on it? Maybe Kate?
Sorry, I don't know that acronym. What is that?
BBNJ is on marine. So BBNJ is the marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, BBNJ negotiations.
I don't know the answer to that. We can try to find out and come back to you. Is that from Marta?
Yeah.
Marta, it's so nice to be in touch with you. It's been a long time. We can follow on this.
Good. And, you know, can I just say quickly, it is needed that this particular group has people really following it, because it's very complicated and very exclusive, and they are keeping us out. Not the group that is leading, you know, the moderators, but it's just very, very much into papers, and not really having the voice of the people, these people that are in these groups, okay? So I'm just saying it because I am one of the few in there, and it's really ridiculous and very difficult.
And you need
but
help.
Decisions are being made.
No, thanks, Martha. It's lovely to hear your voice after so many years, and you're still active. I admire your energy. Thank you so much. And I think I will take this question together with the other one, Martha, just to kind of respond to a little bit about on this discussion with BNJ. As women, the CBD Women's Caucus, I have actually been in touch with some colleagues working on gender issues on BBNJ, and we are trying to kind of make those linkages. And I'm happy to also touch base with you, because I think one of the discussion around BBNJ is the inclusion of traditional knowledge. So we are looking at traditional knowledge in regards to women's traditional knowledge. So I'll be happy to also work on it. And of course, this is also a great way for, I think, IUC and others to also look at to see where are these linkages. And I think I'll say that Claudia, to also answer your query on the climate COP. So we are trying to make these linkages, and one of the discussions around the CBD, what's really happening with the post-2020, and if for some people who are looking might be new in this discussion, the CBD is a convention like the climate. So it's not like which one is better than the other and where we should engage. There's also already a discussion being on where are the synergies, and as from the gender perspective, what we are really trying to do is where are the strong policies and plans and actions that are being played in the UNCCD, in climate or in biodiversity, and trying to place that to see how we could strengthen each of the frameworks. And I think why CBD, and as you all know, that nature suddenly is counting now, right? So many years we've been working in biodiversity sector and nobody really cared about it. Suddenly this whole super year for nature, big year for nature, COVID response, climate response, suddenly there's a lot of focus on nature. And I've never seen so much of attention given to nature and biodiversity before 2020. So this opportunity we are looking at is to also look at these key issues like gender-based violence and environmental linkages besides others. This is just one very small issue of looking at women's rights. You know, all this is then boils down to, unless you have land rights, unless you have recognition of women's right to a healthy environment, women's right to their dignity, none of these other bundle of rights cannot be looked upon in singularity. So what we are seeing as a CBD Women's Caucus and having these dialogues is to look at this platform, which is the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So just sharing with all the participants that this is the time to engage now, because the biodiversity framework is going to be a global framework on issues of biodiversity, conservation, nature, however you might call it. So this is going to be adopted in a COP similar to the climate, the CBD COP, the Convention on Biological Diversity COP, that is scheduled to take place in May 2021. And so we are seeing this, so that is an open opportunity. So everything under that is kind of semi-organic. The limitation we are facing, and I think Laura pointed it out, is that though we have been giving submissions, the recommendation that even IUCN gave on, has not been reflected in the framework document, technical document that got published today. So there's a lot of technicalities. So the idea of having this dialogue was to come up with some like this really good response and this collaboration and commitment from all of you of how we can go forward to ensure that these elements comes in that framework before it is adopted. And when it gets adopted, that it has these key rights of women that is an integral part, not only in one small part of the framework, but relates to the whole of the framework. So, so thank you for I took the time because I think this time we didn't have a presentation on the CBD itself. So I think some of the terminologies that might have been new, like the SBSTA and SBI and Open Air Working Group, would have been new. So we will still, we do have a kind of capacity building webinars on these terminologies. So we hope we will make it much more easier to simplify these terminologies. Is there any other question? Oh yeah, so the other person. So Laurie says, thank you, Martha. When is the next meeting? Or is there a link to BBNJ marine process? How can we monitor this? So that is, I think, again, looking up to IUCN is how do you look at environmental linkages with the terrestrial, but also looking at marine and beyond marine. So that could be some of the linkages that you would have to. Thank you, Laurie. Any other questions or any thoughts from the presenters?
I just wanted to comment quickly on the question earlier on about the impact of women's participation in managing protected areas. I think Bharati already gave an outstanding answer there. I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts. There is some research conducted, especially from global north countries, about women's participation in protected area management. The evidence is that yes, indeed, GBV considerations are rampant in those conditions, but that special, what is the word I'm looking for? Accommodations can rather easily be put in place to ensure safety of professionals. But also there is emerging research around the incredible impact of women rangers. There's a new piece of research coming out soon from, I believe it's the Targeting Natural Resource Corruption Initiative, that's looking at the impact of all women ranger units and the impact that they have in producing incredible protection for biodiversity, zero rates of crime or corruption, and opportunities for increased women's economic empowerment and you know, sort of increased social capital, enabling conditions to contribute to those linked. So just wanted to share that, and we'll flag those resources as they come out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate, for it. Claudia, would you like to share something, please? Claudia, would you like to share some thoughts? So I think we are also, yeah, like Claudia, would you like to share some thoughts?
Sí, bueno, que muy interesante el grupo de mujeres de todo a nivel global, ¿no? Para ver las diferentes perspectivas y diferentes momentos en los que estamos. También recordar, y creo que desde la experiencia de la Amazonía, Madre de Dios, un tema que antes a los pueblos indígenas les parecía como alejado, el tema de diversidad biológica, como que lo escuchaban como algo, no sé, externo, muy científico el término, y ahora entienden, se dan cuenta de la importancia que es mantener la diversidad biológica para mantener también sus medios de vida, sobre todo la seguridad alimentaria y la calidad de los bosques, ¿no? Entonces las mujeres son con un rol tan importante para el mantenimiento de esa calidad del bosque, de esa diversidad biológica que repercute en una adecuada, en ellos mismos, ¿no? En una calidad de vida de la población. Y deberíamos quizás, ¿cómo hacer, mi pregunta quizás, o mi interrogante, o cómo hacer este grupo un poco más productivo? ¿Qué podemos hacer? ¿Cómo los ponemos un poco más activos? ¿Qué cosas es la que deberíamos, quizás, por ejemplo, hay experiencias interesantes que se pueden compartir? Es difícil cuando el grupo es muy grande, porque a veces uno se llena de correos y no termina leyendo todo, pero sí es importante rescatar de repente experiencias que están siendo muy, ya dando como resultados, para ver cómo se pueden aplicar o adaptar a las diferentes circunstancias en otros lados, porque es diferente, por ejemplo, hablar de Asia, de la India, o de África, o de Sudamérica, ¿no? Hay diferentes circunstancias. Sin embargo, también tenemos un hilo conductor y una realidad en común. Y el tema de la falta de visibilización, de la importancia del rol de las mujeres, creo que eso está en todo, es como global, ¿no? Y cómo podemos participar y formar este grupo sea más fuerte y de alguna manera este grupo pueda quizás darnos más herramientas o elementos para fortalecer el trabajo más en las regiones. Eso.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. That was really very inspirational. Like you said, I think it's really very important to also bring home these ideas back to where it also is supposed to be, which is housed at in the local context. And I think that one of the purpose of this dialogue was, first, we targeted to do it on November 25th specifically, is also acknowledging that today is International Day against elimination of violence against women. Just to state that, and then looking at the global context of these emerging issues, and then we are really trying to build a platform of exchange. Either is Latin America, or is Africa, or is it Pacific, or Asia. One of the key aspects of these stories are that they have very similar elements through it. The role of patriarchy, the role of national laws not being implemented, the society stereotypes. So we really hope that with these dialogues, we start building a movement and we start building our collective essence to take on these issues and agendas forward. So I really hope that people who have participated today, we hope that we have been able to have a webinar with a little bit of understanding of the issue. And we will also try to link up your stories, the stories from Nepal, to the policymakers, saying that these are the realities, and we have to house the so-called overarching global context into where the realities hold, where it really matters. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And we will continue having these dialogues, and we will have, we need to make ourselves better also through different time zones. So we will stay engaged. We are 6 minutes over our time. I'm trying to look for, I suppose there aren't any questions per se, but is anybody from the participants like to take the floor and have a question? Please write in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. No. Looking at the time, so thank you so much for everybody for joining this conversation. And we really hope that some of the recommendations that came forward from here, we will be able to highlight them as recommendations into the future upcoming few weeks of the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversities, Post-2020 Global Framework, and some of the meetings, like the co-chair said, is upcoming. And one of the online seminars taking place in December will be on One Health. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take the space right now and and we will send out an email to everybody with our email address and a webpage, and you all are welcome to join our mailing list where we share all the information, publications, relevant news articles, to build awareness and to also engage and stay connected with each other to build up an advocacy tool, even for us to take this forward. So I'm going to invite, let Sarah Subba take the floor. So Sarah is from Nepal. She's one of our advisory board members, and she has also had many experience of working on gender issues and indigenous peoples issues in Nepal at national and global forums, and including her focus also on gender-based violence in the context of in Nepal. She is also a GESI trainer, and I would like her to say a few words on her reflections or key takeaways from this dialogue. So Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tina. You know, what a great session. Dear friends and colleagues, as we come to the end of our session, I think I would really like to emphasize that this has been an important and much needed conversation that needed visibility, in fact. So in that context, I'd like to first thank Basil for taking his time to, be with us and show his support. And what a reminder, he talked about harmony in nature. And indeed, if, women and other vulnerable groups are not engaged, are not happy, if their rights are violated, if they are violated, then this harmony in nature will definitely be sort of discorded and imbalanced. So that was a great reminder for us. And also, we'd also like to extend a thank you to Kate and Laura, representing IUCN, who provided detailed findings of their research and for putting forth such useful recommendations for the post-2020 framework. This is very timely, and here I'm being also reflective in the sense that, I remember the time when my colleagues and I last year in Montreal talked about, finding a space within CBD for, GBV issues. And we were specifically talking about large infrastructure projects, which within or around community conserved areas, protected areas. And this sort of brings in large influx of laborers. And so what happens when they sort of interact with the communities, there's a huge potential of gender-based violence in various forms being escalated because of this. So how do we go forward, and what is the conversation, what is the narrative that we should look forward to or take on? That was the conversation we were having last year, and indeed, IUCN sort of flagged this issue and paved a way for us to take this conversation forward within the CBD platform. So thank you indeed, IUCN. Thank you again. And our special thank you to our colleagues, Bharati ji and Claudia and Vanessa, for really sharing their experiences and stories in addressing GBV in their respective fields. And lastly, I'm going to make this very brief because we're running out of time. And lastly, to all our participants from across the globe who thought, who gave this issue importance to attend this session. So thank you very much. And also to our translators, both the Lucias, for translating the session. And lastly, I think we're going away with a lot of takeaways, but for me personally and for Women for Biodiversity, I think the main takeaway would be to keep advocating and promoting for, prevention and response measures regarding GBV in every environmental related projects, or projects within biodiversity or conserved areas, any kind of projects that are happening within conserved areas, protected areas. We have to be mindful of these issues emerging, and we have to keep sort of promoting promoting safeguards to mitigate these issues and respond to these. Thank you so much, and good night from Nepal, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah, for closing. So before we lose people, I know it's been a very long session, but I think this needed a longer time. Before we close down, we had actually planned an activity to kind of get people off getting a little bit interested. So Amelia is there. Amelia, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is just a small activity for us to know how impactful has been this session. So I'm going to share in our chat the link for you to come to this Mentimeter and to let us know your key takeaways from this session. So, but also you can copy the code that is in the screen already.
Yes, Amelia, can you put the link of the Mentimeter on the chat again?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah, so everybody, please stay for like 1 minute, because we want to take some key takeovers for this session. This will also help us just maybe brainstorm for some future sessions we want to do and some key elements that we could take from here. So Amelia has shared a Mentimeter link, if you can click on that and just put in the keywords, key 3 words that you could take away from the session.
You just need to click on the link that is in the chat, either from your computer or from your cell phone, and share your messages. So,
Thank you for taking this 1 extra minute to do this, because we would like to see yeah, thank you, everybody. I think before so before we close, I don't think we don't have much time, but thank you. Just wanted to an understanding of some reflections from all of you. So once again, so these are some of the key words that all of you put in, looking at takeaway on gender and equality. Now I think my computer is opportunities, safeguards. Okay, so thank you so much. We will put this up on our webpage, and once again, thank you for taking the time for being here with us. Please feel free to email us and also to reach out, and we will be sharing all the publications links and the recording of the webinar in a day or two. Is there anything else? No?
The picture, no?
Oh, the picture. Oh my God, we've lost half the people. Okay, so this is what we do. Can you, all of you, please put your video on? Now you can, so we can see who all are there. Sorry, we're taking extra time, but we love doing this, to see all the faces of all of you virtually. And Amita will take a photo of this. Hi, everybody. For some people who can spare a few minutes more. Oh, wow, it's lovely to see some familiar faces I shouldn't say familiar because it's going to be a year since we last met, which was in Rome. So many familiar faces in that way. Hi, Henrik. Hi, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Tina.
Hi,
Well,
Lord.
congrats.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you could attend. Hi, Ruth. We have a lot of different countries also. So this is like a global session, taking over different time zones, some in the future, some in the past, because of time zones. Yes, so hopefully, so we will be having another follow-up, another webinar early December. We are targeting December 10th. It's the International Human Rights Day. So we will be looking from now on to there to build up some work following from there. And this is just the beginning. We are just doing a stepping stone. There's a lot of work to do, and happy to see all of you interested and engaged. I mean, did you take all the photos? We'd like to do a photo op.
Yeah, it's done. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, have a wonderful afternoon, and a wonderful evening. Good night.
Gracias a todas. Nos vemos.
Thank you.